Today's Dafyomi is Bava Basra Daf Kuf Mem Bava Basra 144, and we're going to start on the top of 144a. So the Gemara says that in a case where one of the brothers said, I'm going to be working for myself, he puts the other brothers on notice, then we say under those circumstances that indeed he is able to get the profits. So, but he has to put the other brothers on notice. So Rav Safra Shavak Avua Zuze. So Rav Safra, his father, had left the money. So Shaklinu, we took the money and Avabu Iska, and he did business with it. So also Ache and Tavua Bedina. Hamei, the Rava. So his brothers came along and they took him to court in front of Rava and they said, the give us our share of the profits you made. You never put us on notice. So Rava said, Amar Lahu, Rava said to them, no, Rav Safar doesn't need to put you on notice. Gavra Rabahu, he's a great man. And L'shavak Girsei V'tarach Achrine, he wouldn't have abandoned his studies and started working for you. So therefore, it's obviously the case that he was engaging in this strictly for himself. So obviously, there's the tacit understanding that he meant it for himself, and he does not have to. He does not have to put you on notice. It's assumed he put you on notice. Gemara then gives a similar story with a wife. Isha sheshpichas in the chasim. If a woman if a woman improves the estate, she improves it for the middle. And so the Gemara first asks the question, Isha what is the woman doing with the orphan's money? So what's her business with it? So Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Isha Yoreshes. So we're talking about a woman who clearly she inherited. And so therefore, how did she inherit? Maybe he basically gave it to her right before he died. That's one example. There are other examples, but that's one example. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, Pshita, obviously that if she works on behalf of the estate, she splits it with the estate. The Gemara says, no, Tema, Kimin have Darko a Mitrach, Afagav the Parish, Kamo de Parish. We might have said, since she typically doesn't work on behalf of the state, then in this case, it's like the same tacit understanding that was with Rav Safra. She doesn't need to be explicit. Kamash Moa, no, she needs to be explicit. Next case, if the woman stipulates, look, whatever is done, I'm going to benefit, she puts them on notice, then she gets it for herself. So Gemara says, Pshita, that's obvious. Why does it need to tell us this? Isn't this obvious? Of course, it's why is it any different than the first clause of the Mishnah? So Gemara says, no, you might have thought, Kivan de Shvicho Amilsa, the Amri Katarcha Kame Yasmi, you might have said, since Kivan de Tircho Amilsa, Kivan de Shvicho Amilsa, the Amri Katircha Kame Yasmi, since you might have thought to say that since it's to her benefit that people, it improves her reputation, that people are saying she's working on behalf of the orphans, that she has in effect waived her rights to her share of the improvements. Kamashma, and she's not waiving anything. Reputation only goes so far. She wants the cash. Amar b'chanina, amesi isha with no gadol bebayis. That says Rabbi Chanina, if a person marries off his son to if a person marries off his Beno Gadol, his oldest son, in a wedding house, then Kano. In those days, when a person married off his eldest son, he was to build the chuppah, was the house that the son was getting married in. So Rabbi Chanina is teaching us that if the father sets aside a house for the wedding and he doesn't use the house for anything else, he doesn't live there or use it for storage, that's what the Gemara is going to say, then by a takana, we assume that the Rabbanan are giving it to him. Then he's acquired it. B'davka gadol, it's only if it's the eldest son. and Vidavka Basula, and only where he's marrying a virgin. Vidavka Ishta Rishona, and only where it's his first wife. Vidavka Sheisio Rishon, it's only where he marries him off before any of the younger siblings. That's especially special to his father in all these cases, and we assume that in this case he's giving him the wedding house to his son. So the Gemara says, "Well, pshita yichu aviv bayis v'aliyah." It's obvious that if the father gives him the house and an attic, the upper story, bayis kana aliyah, so kana. In those days, they would live in the upper floor, so he's only giving the ground floor. But the upper story is something else. He doesn't require the upper story. Bayis v'achsajama. What about the house and the porch? Or shnei batim zelef nimizema, or two houses, one inside the other. What's the story there? So the Gemara says, under these circumstances, take it. We're going to leave this question unresolved. Under these circumstances, we're going to leave this question unresolved. So Meisvei, the Gemara challenges Rabbi Chanina's halacha. Yichid lo aviv bayis uklei bayis. It says in the Brisa that if the father set aside for him a wedding house and the furniture in the house, klei bayis kana bayis lo kana. He's acquired the furniture but not the house. So it seems to be from this Brisa that he's only acquiring the furniture and not the house. No, what's that case referring to? If you go in Shaya Otzro Shal Aviv Lunachsham. Now we're talking about a case there where the father is using the house for his own purposes. He's using it, he's storing his food there. And so therefore, since the father is continuing to use it, he's not removed it from his possession by having the wedding there. And so since he's not removed it from his possession by having the wedding there, the son does not acquire it. But he does acquire the furnishings. So now, what does it mean to say that you're storing stuff there? Even if he just has a dovecote there, the son does not acquire it. Even a pot of fried fish. And Marzutra Ansabe Lebre, the Tole Sandal, and Marzutra would, when he married off his son, he put a stand on the house to prevent his son from acquiring the house. And Rav Ashi Nasbe Lebre, Vesole Ashisha de Mishta. Rav Ashi married off his son and he hung a cup of oil. Amar Marzutra, Hani Talas Mili Shavina Rabbanan Kilchas Abelotam. These three things the rabbi said that they're Alocha Moshe Misinai and they don't need to have an explanation. So basically, what are these three things? Chadaha, one is this law that the son acquires the house. The Rashbam says they made this law, meaning according to the laws of acquisition, nothing has happened that would cause the wedding house to become the groom's. But the rabbis made this takana to give honor to the groom, because it's humiliating for the groom to have nowhere to go after the wedding. So when the father empties his house, he's basically teaching the son that the house is granted to him. Number two, the rabbis understood that if a person says, I'm giving all my assets to his wife, we had this earlier, he doesn't really want to give her all of his assets. He just really is intending for her to be the executor of the estate. And the reason is because a person would not disenfranchise his own son. Person wouldn't disenfranchise his children. And that we had earlier in our Gemara. Where do we have that? We had that back on 131. We had this just 2 weeks ago. And the third thing is, if somebody says to his friend, you have a man of mine, I want you to give it to so-and-so, if he made this declaration in front of three people, the third party acquires it without any kinyan. So we can't go back on that. So the Gemara now at the top of 144b of the Mishnah. So the Mishnah tells us, Achin hashutafin. So if you have brothers who are partners, shenafo echad mehen umanus, and one of them fell into work, the Gemara is going to tell us what that means. Nafo emtza. So that helps the estate. Cholav and Nisrapa, if he took sick and was healed, Nisrapa Mishalatzmo, he has to pay for it himself. So the Gemara says, what does it mean, Nafal Umnis? One of them fell into work. What does that mean? Tana Hai Umnis, what's it referring to? Well, Umnis Amelch means to say he was appointed to the service of the king. Rashbam says, what does this mean? He has to collect the taxes. Basically, there's a rotation. And the tax collector had to present the money to the king by a date. And whatever profit he could realize from the investment in the interim was his to keep. So the Mishnah is teaching that one of the brothers who's sharing the estate is given this job as a tax collector, then the brothers share in the profits. Because the reason why he was appointed was because he was a member of the household whose turn it was to collect taxes, and not from any special skill he has. That's why it goes to the estate. Tana Rabbanan, so the similar bride, so Echad min ha'achin sheminu gabay opomus, who was appointed tax collector or magistrate. So if a person was appointed tax collector or magistrate, pomus means to like a polemic. Imachmas ha'achin, if it was because of his brothers, meaning say he got it from the estate, then the brothers share. Imachmas atzmo ha'achin, not his own, he gets to keep it. Imachmas ha'achin pshita, if it's from the brothers, obviously the brothers get to keep it. We're saying no. He is sharper than the other brothers. So now you might have said a korfe garamway. You might have said he got the job because he was so sharp. We learn from here that that's not the case. One of the brothers who got 200 zuz, Lomod Torah, Lomod Umnis. One of the brothers took 200 zuz from the estate to study Torah or to learn a profession. The other brothers could say to him, if you live with us, you're entitled to food. They could say, we'll give you the 200 zuz, but that's only when you live with us. It means say every brother is entitled to support. So the Bryce is telling us that if you live elsewhere, you can't get support from the estate. So if you take 200 zuz towards the support from away from home, the brothers can say, no, you're only entitled to support if you live at home. And if you move away, then we're going to subtract the 200 zuz from your estate. The Gemara says, what is the difference to them where he gives? Let them give him food wherever he is. So no, the blessing in the house is in when more people are there, the house is blessed. That means that you share costs. The blessing of the house is if 5 people live together in the same house, the same lighting, and so basically they don't want to pay. So the Gemara says, so let him give them a reduced rate. Let him give them according to what he would get if he's living in the house. So, okay, fine, it's less, but give him less. The Gemara says, no, achinami, yes, that's indeed what they'll do. He only gets the amount that he would live if he was at home, not what he would get if he moved out on his own. If he was sick and he was healed, he has to pay for it himself. So the Gemara says, when do we say that he has to pay for it himself when he got sick negligently? But if it's not his fault, then he has to pay. Then the estate has to pay for it. And what's negligence? Everything comes from heaven except for cold drafts, meaning to say all the attacks upon a person while the animals are bandits are decreed upon him by heaven, except by exposing yourself to the cold or other unhealthy practices. So everything is from heaven except if you act irresponsibly. As it says, as it says in the verse in Proverbs, cold drafts are snares in the way of a stubborn person, and one who guards himself will distance himself from them. So it says the Mishnah, so if somebody, one of the brothers was a groomsman during his father's lifetime, and such a groomsman, and he brings him gifts to the other person, and the idea is that the other person is going to reciprocate. So then, when it comes time to return, Even though the guy acted as the groomsman during the father's lifetime, but now the father's deceased, the estate gets it. Because the idea that you're entitled to seize this is actually can be seized by a court. It's like a loan that has to be repaid. So, but if you send your friend jugs of wine and oil from the estate, you don't collect them in court because that's an act of kindness. It's just a gift of a goodwill. So shushvinios is not considered a gift of a goodwill. But we have a contradiction. But we have a contradiction. It says if the father sent him a groomsman gift, it says if the father sent him to deliver a groomsman gift, when it returns to him alone and not the estate. So it's a direct contradiction in this brisa. If it was sent to his father, when it returns, should you pay from the middle? So Amar Abasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kitanan Nami Masnisin, Nishtacho Aviv Tanan. When our Mishnah says that it goes to everybody, it means that it's sent to the father. That the Mishnah's case is not where the father is sending the groomsman's gift, but rather of the father receiving the gift. So in such cases that we say the groomsman's gift reciprocated is paid for by the estate. That's what it means. But where the father sent the groomsman's gift, Mishnah would agree that with the brisa that it belongs exclusively to the son who acted as the original groomsman. Mar says, it says the brothers did it. Tani limiksasan, meaning to some of the brothers. It says when it's returned, achakamar. If it's returned to be collected, it's collected from the common estate. Ravasi Amar, a different answer. First. It depends. The Mishnah says when the first sanctifying. It's on behalf of a specific son. Meaning to say, if the father sent him to deliver a groomsman's gift, when it returns to him alone. But if his father said, stam, without saying he's the one giving it, it goes back to the state. Shmuel gives a different answer. We're dealing with a yavam. The yavam, i.e. the husband's brother, does not take the roy as it is with muhsak. So the Gemara says, Miklal the idach mishalim. Do you mean that the other one does not pay? Why doesn't he say, give it to me and I'll rejoice with him? In place where customs return the kedushin, you return it. That's only where she does. If he dies, they don't return it. My time, she could say, give me my husband, I'll rejoice with him. Give me my groomsmen, I'll rejoice. So it says Rav Yosef, what are we talking about here? Could go into they rejoiced for 7 days, but he didn't manage to pay him back until he died. Okay, obviously, we're going to get into this more on the daf, only for Shabbos, Kodesh, and we have a lot to do with betrothal gifts at this point, but we'll stop here. Yeshakoach.
Thank you. Good Shabbos.